life sucks the energy out of you. It might sound like a harsh way to put it, but that's what it does. You wake up, and from the moment you wake up, there are things you have to do. I mean, I have athletes that say that frequently, like, I just needed the day off. I just needed to escape. I needed a day off. I needed to go for a hike. I needed to go for a long swim. I need to get in the kayak or hop on the boat or do whatever. And I do think that's also a piece that everyone is missing. And I also think it's why people are looking towards different challenges to do things, is that we all need an escape.
Hey buddy, how you doing?
Hey, happy Monday, man. It is June 22nd, 2020, and this is one of the last podcasts we're ever going to do with you living in Nashville.
It's one of them. Yeah,
It
definitely.
is. It's one of them. It's like we're going to be, it'd be interesting to travel the geography of our podcast recordings. We've obviously done them in different states. You've done them in Wisconsin, when I've been in Nashville, Kansas City, Chattanooga, and obviously I've been here in Chattanooga for the last just over a year now, just barely over a year. And you are making the big move to Chattanooga this coming week.
Yeah, I am, man. It's
Yeah.
been pretty wild around here, trying to
Yeah.
get everything organized and decide what I'm going to keep and throw away and when.
That's the toughest part, man. What do I keep? What do I throw away? What do I need to donate? What's really important to me? And do I actually need this, or have I just been storing it for the last 25 years?
Yeah, I've left quite a legacy with my neighbors, I'll tell you that much. Hey, you
You
want
got
this?
any one of these?
This is a sweet shop lamp.
Yeah.
I got this extension cord here, man. You can have it. They're avoiding me now.
Oh, I bet you they're like,
Is
yeah,
it-
he's outside trying to give away a spatula. We need to stay inside right now.
I know. Because I had a dumpster and I was throwing everything away, and that ignited sort of a purge in the whole neighborhood.
Oh,
And now, so I'm trying to give them stuff, and they don't want anything anymore. So
you've
it's been
created a
tricky.
minimalist movement, it sounds like, in the East Nashville neighborhood.
Yeah, I have a lot of influence around here.
Oh, you do.
Too bad I'm leaving.
Hashtag, yeah, well, hey, send them out on a high note. Speaking of high notes, this is podcast 384 of the Crushing Iron podcast. We come to you twice a week, for the most part, Mondays and Thursdays, but always twice for going on 4 years now. We cover all things triathlon and all things life. We cover how they intersect, how they complement each other, how they sometimes will take away. And Mike and I, for the most part, sit back, have a conversational style format, no ads, no sponsors, just open discussion. Sometimes we'll veer into more of the technical aspects of triathlon, swim, bike, run, nutrition, training, and then even sometimes deep dive into the data. Other times we might have on guests, like we did the previous week with Ken Hammond, one of Ironman's race directors, to talk about the new formats they have and how life has been as a race director right now during the COVID pandemic. And then other times I'll have another guest, but for the most part, we just open it up to what we're feeling, what we're personally going through. We'll oftentimes uh, hammer out some of the other topics that our current athletes have and going through, and then sometimes we'll hop into our closed Facebook group, which is Crushing Iron Group on Facebook. You can hop in there if you like and answer a simple question, and we'll let you in. But lots of great people in there, great community, lots of experience, lots of wisdom, and always very generous with their time and answering questions. I do want to mention quickly. I believe, I mean, I scanned it quickly, but I believe I saw someone in our closed group did a self-supported Ironman this weekend, which is completely insane to me. Kudos to her. But I mean, I can't fathom. That's a big no thanks in my department, but I have to give a round of applause. Her name was Marlene, and I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name because I'll butcher it. Know where your strengths and weaknesses are for me. But she did it, and I feel it's an incredible feat. So if you're in there, give her a good kudos and super props to you, Marlene. It takes a lot of not just physical fitness, but I think an incredible amount of mental and emotional fortitude.
I gotta say, yeah, that's pretty impressive to pull that off. I assume that hers got canceled, and she was not going to let that bring her down. It's much like that. Well, it's not like it, but it's similar to when the swim got canceled at Louisville, and I had two young ladies approach me and say they were going to swim in the hotel pool.
I remember this discussion. I was there.
Yeah, you were there.
Yeah, you would. I gotta admit, you entertained that discussion in a much more pleasant and peaceful manner as you were engaged than I did.
Yeah, well, I did, and
So
I
people like,
I don't know how many. I wish I can remember off the top how many laps that was in a hotel pool. It was something like 250. I don't know. It was ridiculous, but pretty crazy stuff. But I kind of get it. It was the first, and I'm sure maybe this was her first. I don't know. It's like this whole year has thrown a weird thing on some of that stuff, and it kind of makes you dig deep and figure out why you're doing this triathlon business in the first place. And obviously for her, it was to, just accomplish something.
yeah. I
And
mean,
no accolades, no cheering, no, maybe there's a medal from
well, maybe. I mean,
family.
I remember as well. Like the last year before Louisville, I think wasn't it like the month before? Was that the year that Chattanooga also there's some canceled, and a lot of people were heading over to the downtown YMCA super early. They were opening up and letting people swim their 2.4, and then had never transitioned. Which again, like that's something that I personally don't advocate for the day, but because I mean, first and foremost, if you've ever been to a YMCA, there's so much chlorine in those pools that I can't imagine the effect that the chlorine is going to have on your baking skin for the next 14 hours. But I do think it's an interesting, like discussion point if we wanted to hop on that direction was just why events and names and distances mean so much to certain people. Like some people would say, "Oh, my race is canceled, move it to next year." Some people have had their races canceled, and they've been not just bummed, but they've been basically thrown off their game in terms of they're just not training at all. They've lost all motivation. They've lost all sense of why they are doing this. They don't feel as committed because they don't have that race dangling in the future. You have some athletes who obviously have just love to train. It's not bothering them. And then you have people like Marlene here. It's like, oh, well, you're going to take away my Ironman, but I still feel like I want to complete this journey, so I'm going to do it myself. And I don't need the red carpet. I don't need the finish line. I don't need the big, hoopla around it. I just want to do it for me. And I think it's just a good, well, maybe not a good topic, but just a good thing to remind ourselves is that we all do this for different reasons, and we all have our own why. And I think even within that own why, it changes. Over months and even over years, it can go from one end of the spectrum to another. And that everybody that toes the start line and walks up to a race, or that tips their toe into endurance sports, they do it for their own self, for their own specific reasons. And some of those are I don't want to say some of them are better than others because it's all relative. But I think some of the reasons that we do this stay with us longer and do support us in a way that would lead to an example like that, like she did in doing her own Ironman, something she felt obviously very resolute to do, very, as she said, was very empowering, I think, in her Facebook post. And I can imagine so doing that with no fans. I mean, I think she had some family and friends there, but not like the big hoopla that there is the Ironman. You're not going to have the big finisher photo. You're not going to have the clock ahead, all the other things that come along with it. But to know that you can accomplish something like that no matter what, and that the world can't take everything from you if you don't let it. A lot of that's our choice. So many people these days get offended, get their feelings hurt, get mad, get angry, whatever it is by things they read or things people say, and ultimately like a lot of that is on us. Like we have a choice on to let ourselves be offended or to be hurt or to be angry, and we allow ourselves to put energy in that direction, or we can just not and continue to do something else that might make us feel positive and more healthy. And that's obviously something she did. So yeah, that's why I think endurance sports are so great, because you can do so many of these events on your own. Like sports like basketball or football, like you know if someone is by themselves, like they can't just go out and play, a pickup game of 5-on-5. They can't go out and play a football game. They can't, play these other, hockey, whatever it is, soccer. But for endurance athletes, because it's such a individual sport, we can still do these things. They might not be an official race, but you can still go out and do, for the most part, the exact distances that you would do during a race. And I think that's a very unique part of our sport that I think sometimes we forget.
You're right about that, man. I couldn't agree more. I guess there's ability to like every day go out and quote unquote do, a race of your own volition, even in a training session, to kind of mentally do that. And for what she did to kind of suck that up and go out there, Man, that's the next level stuff for me, man. I think because we have talked about it many times, the idea of what that, finisher line means at Ironman. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
eh, we can sit here all we want and say that, it's not about that, but man, it kind of is about that sometimes at the end, I mean, that's like it's that crowning jewel. It is, and we talk about how that's like going across the stage at graduation and how I feel for these, a lot of kids this year who didn't get to experience that
Yeah.
because they did do the work, but they didn't get a chance to, sort of be on that pedestal and sort of look out at their peers and say, "Hey, we did this together." And that's one of those, we always talk about community, and I think that there's this really kind of cool sub community at the end of an Ironman because you all just sort of went through it, and
Right.
there's it's just the ability to reach out and kind of, well, I don't know, shake hands anymore, but you can fist bump some people and say, hey, you automatically have something in common. And I think that's the thing, right? It's like you never, that's the thing in life anyway. You just kind of don't want to feel like you're alone and on
Mm-hmm.
an island. And there's those moments like that. So for her to go do that by herself is amazing. And I like what you said too about we do have choices, right? And I have uh, not a long list, but a kind of a go-to list of podcasts. I've
I
been
was gonna
listening.
say.
What? I've been listening to podcasts for a long time,
Mm.
and I have a go-to list. And it's just yesterday, I was kind of cleaning up, listening to some stuff, and I just can't believe sort of the tone that everything has gone to. It's it feels like this political year in a lot of ways, and we never get into that. And I just think that, man, we have choices, and I just made choices to dump a lot of podcasts because comedy podcasts or whatever, they're all getting into this like thing, and I think it's important for us to really find things that make us happy, things that make us healthy, and it's so easy to get dragged into situations or listening or watching things that don't, because they sort of, what do they do? Flame the side of
They
us,
fan the flame, man. They
fan the
fan
flame
the
of
flame.
that side of us that we don't really like, but it's familiar or something like that. You know what I mean?
Well, I think a lot of people are doing it right now because it's an instant headline grabber. It's unfortunately, and I think it's actually incredibly sad that that has become like I think we've become addicted to it. Like and I think news and media outlets and like you just said, like even podcasts, it's like you have to be on one end of the spectrum or the other, and that's how you create the own buzz or the own like draw to listening to your podcast or listening to your show or whatever it is. Like it's all about this. It's not just about, in my opinion, like keeping things even keel and trying to be objective, but really just like sharing your own genuine thoughts that have no outside, like our agenda is to have no agenda. In a way, it's like, I'm sure we do, and I'm sure there's an overarching theme and a philosophy behind the majority of what you and I talk about on our podcast. But I think in terms of like how people are going in other directions, like everyone has to people go up and down and be what's popular and what's newsworthy, and the more you gravitate towards those headlines, the more clicks you're going to get, the more listens you might get. But like you and I've talked about this before, we are we are far from one of the most popular podcasts on the planet. We are probably not even the most popular triathlon podcast, and we don't do interviews. We don't do which is what most podcasts do. They have interviews, with the professional athletes, coaches all the time, which I think are great. But it's like we would rather be a pretty solid band with a good amount of followers, and listeners that like us. But they want to buy the T-shirts, they want to buy your CDs, and they actually want to come to your concerts, not to create like a one-hit single.
Mm.
Which if I mean, what I'm saying, like
No, I totally agree with that, man. I
that's how
mean,
it is, and I have like no musical background at all, zero. So I can't even like riff on anything music. You're quite the drummer, but that's the way people go. And before, well, I'm like torn between two different subjects right now because I could definitely keep going on this and about the energy that we put towards allowing other people to suck. I was literally just having this conversation with another person this morning. Was like, they're talking about Facebook, and right now is like everyone. I find it incredibly fascinating that everyone has so much time on their hands to go back and forth for like thousands of hours on doing Facebook comments. I have admittedly been I have taken a step back from Facebook. I post on it very infrequently, much less than I ever have before, probably. And even on our own Crushing Iron group and our Even Active Athlete page, I think I've done that. Whether it's good or bad, I don't really know that. But I found myself I've taken the app off my phone. I found myself because I found myself saying, is this really worth your time and energy? Not that answering people's questions and athletes' questions is not worth your time, but when you get onto Facebook and you kind of hop into someone's feed and through their posts and you start making comments and going back and forth, I think it's important to step back and ask yourself, like, what the hell are you even doing? And
Hmm.
is this even worth your time? Like, because we don't get that time back. And you're like at the end of the week when you're going through like the pie graph of how you spent your time. I slept, I ate, I trained, I spent time with my kids, my spouse, I read a book. How much of that pie is going to be, well, I spent, 4.5 hours, you know, uh, arguing on Facebook and accomplishing nothing. And if you add that over the course of like weeks and months and years, how many days and weeks are you going to spend doing that and get absolutely zero value out of it? And so I think how we spend our energy and how we spend our time is like one of the very few things we have left that is sacred to ourselves, and that we can only put a value on it. Like we I think we always tend to overvalue certain things and then undervalue others. I think that's human nature, and then we don't like to think about, like, am I really wasting my time right now? Am I really um like my with my son, like with Hayden, the past few weeks have been super busy, and even this weekend, like we were we were very busy around our house doing certain things, and he's picked up this phrase that I don't take it personally, but I know I've said it to him before. Is he'll because as he's about to turn 4 this next month, and he'll pick up phrases that we say, and he'll, like, one of them is like, oh well, you're just mistaken, Dad. I'm like, first of all, excuse me, what do you mean I was mistaken? Like, his, he picks up these phrases, like he's like, oh, you didn't mean that, you were just mistaken. I was like, oh, sweet. It's like he's been listening to Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire go against the you know in the public hearings over in Congress about steroid use. But another one he's been saying the last week or two, he's like, oh, I can't right now, I'm busy. And it kind of takes a jab at me. Like, he's not meaning it in that way, and I frankly, I don't even say that to him very often. I will sometimes, a, because I'm either a, I am busy, or b, because, like, I mean, I love him to death, but he is like incessantly like energetic and wants to do something 24/7. Sometimes I'm like, dude, I just need a break. But yeah, it does make you think, like, how are we spending the energy that we have, and are we doing it? Because I think there's a huge difference. I believe this in spending energy and then just being obsessed with being busy. And that's something that I personally find myself struggling with, is that I like to put my energy out there. I like to do things. I like to be busy. Sometimes it's actually difficult for me to quiet my mind with everything that's going on in life. I'm a problem solver by nature. It's why I love being a coach, but it also means my mind is always working. Like, how can I fix this? Is this working? Is this not working? How can I do better? How can I be doing this? Like, what needs to improve? And it makes your mind super busy, and that sometimes you're just not being really present. And so I think that, even with training, I find it. I was reading athletes' comments this morning, about training, and then about just kind of like dozing off as they became unpresent in their training, and like worrying about something or thinking about something. But I do think, energy, conservation, if you will, or how we spend it, and time management. Not time management as in like our ability to complete tasks, but time management as in how selfish we are with our own time. And I don't mean selfish as in a bad way. I mean selfish as in, like, we like that this time is yours. Like, it is 100% yours, and you get to spend it how you want to. And I don't think anyone's perfect in terms of how they spend their times. We all waste time. Like, that's just a fact. We all waste time. Because you don't want to be busy all the time either, because I don't think you should be exhausted. So after that, like, 6-minute kind of outline of the direction I could go, I want to rewind super quick, because I'm gonna let you pick the two. Is You said something about training for Ironman, and how we miss out on that red carpet experience,
Hmm.
and it 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 it, it had this like immediate clip in my mind, like that I played back. I was there. Um, and that one of the things that I think we feel like we're missing out on the most is that the finish line in the event, in the atmosphere, in the environment, when our friends and our family and our loved ones can come and they can be there in that experience. The day and then the finish line largely serves as a thank you to the hours that they spent supporting us, to believing in us, to, giving us those kind words, before the race or during training. And when you see people finish these races when they're with their family and with their friends and they're hugging each other, and you have like family members and friends like literally crying because they've seen a loved one or a family member, a spouse, a son, a father, whatever, wife, it's like they see them finish this, they're like emotionally moved. And it's like this, yeah, let's say spiritual event. It's like a mental and emotional event that transpires between these groups of people because of one person's journey that concluded in this race. And I think that is a huge part of what people are actually missing right now is that culmination, like you said about the whole graduation thing. But also, I think as for those of us that triathlon is such a huge part of our life that it bleeds into making it a family affair or a friends and family affair, that when we get to do these events and our people who support us get to take part, whether it's there or whether it's from afar on iron track or whatever, like they get to feel like they are part of it on that day. And I think the removal of that is actually a huge piece in what a lot of people are struggling with, and why people are removing themselves from training as much as normal, or why they're feeling like, frustrated and anxious about it, because you want an opportunity for yourself to race, that's why you do it. But that's a huge piece, is removing that opportunity away to say thank you and to show your appreciation into. I mean, I know you went through this, like when you were training for your first Ironman, like watching your whole family at the finish line, brother, your sister, like your mom, your dad, like you, Pete, like all these people were there, and it was like, if you hadn't have been wearing a kit, you wouldn't have known who did the race. And
Hmm.
you know what I mean? Like I don't
Yeah.
know if you felt that way, but as a spectator watching, and as I think we've all watched these events, and you've shot more finish lines than anybody I know in terms of like catching these special moments. I just think it's a really interesting display of love and gratitude and thanks and support. And it also shows us how our own, going back to I guess the other energy piece, and how our own energy and what we actually do decide to commit ourselves to, how that can infect people in a positive way.
Well, you've had me shift gears about 3 or 4 times
Sorry,
as I
dude.
listen. There's no question about that. I mean, you bring up my first, but I got to say, yeah, and I don't know how many Ironman finish lines I've shot or halves and things. It's well over, probably over 20. And for me, I like going. It's even the days before. I like going up. Like usually, I go to Wisconsin like on Wednesday or Tuesday
Hmm.
sometime.
I know.
And I just love the sort of like slow build into that weekend. And those are sort of some of my more memorable times as well. The days before, the walking around, the grabbing a piece of pizza, the just hanging out, talking stuff, and of course the finish line. And I agree, it's like this. Um, it is. It's such a moment of. We always talk about grace, and I kind of feel like that when you get down to the finish line. It's like there's so much, for lack of a better word, love in my heart or something like that. It's like everybody's out there and everybody's just proud of you and they don't even know you. And then of course you get in and you see your family and your friends and teammates and all that sort of stuff. So that moment and the culmination of that long season and there's just, I don't know, man. It's like I always talk about it as in a lot of ways it is sort of a relief, and there's nothing that can calm your mind and your spirit like being relieved on that level, because when you look around at that point, you're not thinking about your bills and your dumb little problems and all these sorts of things. And as you were talking about earlier about Facebook or whatnot, I was kind of thinking to me, my question was like, what's really really important to you? And it seems like often, and I too have deleted Facebook off my phone for that very reason, because what happens is I get into there, and then you start thinking about things like trying to make money all the time, or you argue about sports or politics, and these are arguments that are unsolvable. Nobody's going to win. And what does that do to your spirit? I mean, like, what am I trying to prove by making points that, I think are right, but really in the big scope of everything, nobody really knows. I mean, it's also fluid. We don't even know what's going on. I mean, there's so many un, I guess, discernible things in life, and we just sort of like argue about them. But that's why I say is what, spending energy versus being busy. What are you spending your energy on? And it's so much better to, and it's this fear of missing out, because I don't really feel like I'm missing anything. If something happens, you'll tell me, right? Or somebody I know will be like, hey,
Yes. I mean,
dude, you better get out of your house, or
somebody will tell me, and then I'll tell you because I won't know either. But somebody, Allie's usually like, "Hey, did you see there were like the tornadoes in Nashville thing? Like when everyone's like super worried, like half of me was like, oh, Mike was probably like slipped to the whole thing. He probably has no idea it's even going on right now. He's probably oblivious. He could wake up and there'd be like 19 houses totally gone around him, and his house would be remaining. He'd wake up and be like, oh, I guess they're renovating the street, and I got, they missed out on me, but yeah, I definitely
I
would. I
missed
definitely
limb
get
pickup.
yeah, exactly. Miss Lim pickup.
Yeah. So, is that where you want to go with the trust, and or not trust, but the love and sharing of
Yeah,
family?
I think either. I mean, we can talk about whatever. We can just keep going because I think the conversation is fluid as usual. Sorry for our guests. We like to keep you on your toes. Lateral movement, right? Like right brain to left brain, like just going back and forth, emotional, non-emotional, mental, physical. I do think that is part of a lot of athletes training right now in the. And we listen. We all like to show our work. Like that's why so many athletes find themselves digging themselves in these gigantic holes in training because we are obsessed with showing our work. A lot of times we are much less obsessed with doing the work. We would rather show the same work that we've already done over and over and over and over again every day because we like to put things on display. We like to be lauded, like to be appreciated, like to be acknowledged. Yet you go the other direction, and a lot of people in the way that you should be in my opinion, especially with training, is you just sit back quietly and do the work for a long period of time.
Hmm.
But right now that's becoming even harder for the people who are built like that, who like to work hard and like to grind away and like to keep going, and they're super patient. They don't have to go out and run overly hard or bike super hard every day and do extra because it's extra and show that they've got it or they're worth it, they're getting better and look at it. But now it's like, well, man, like when do I like when do I get to show my work? Like you're asking a student to study for 2 years before taking a test, and you're like, wait a minute, like
Yeah.
I'm starting to get disengaged. Like, what am I even studying this for if I'm not going to be able to take a test? Or even worse, when am I going to take the test? Like if you take like Olympic athletes in the mental and emotional strength and fortitude and resilience they have to know that while everything matters before it, nothing matters until 4 years from now or 3 or 4 years from now. And yes, you have events and you have things that take place in the middle of it, but it all comes down to one day. And while like what we do on an age group hobbyist level, it doesn't even compare to that. I think the hardest part is that not, and I do think specifically, this is why a lot of athletes have chosen to not take the offerings that a lot of races have, that is like, we're just going to delay you from April to October or May to August, and you can race out. And most people, in my experience as a coach, as I work with these athletes, most of them have said, well, I'm just going to go to next year. And I think a large part of that is that I can at least believe with almost 100% certainty, or at least more certainty, that that race will happen, that I can now reset my clock in terms of I'm training for this next year, for this next date, versus I still don't know if this race
Yeah.
is going to happen. And that, like, I think it's hard to, I think it's a hard conversation to have with yourself. And like, Is it gonna happen? I get athletes ask me this like all the time. They're like, "Do you think it's gonna?" I'm like, first of all, I don't know. Like, I have no idea. I have told athletes specifically, like, if you're going to look at racing for the rest of this year, then you need to look at these specific states that are reopening. You do not need to look at these other states that have no plans on anything happening. Like, you need to be specific about it. But even then, you're like, I mean, you just don't know. And I think that's a really hard part, because like, you're asking me to do this work, you're asking me to study for this test, you're right, whatever it is, but you're not giving me like a deadline or an end day or when this race is going to happen or when can I take this test. So it's easy to like lose interest. But I also think that's why it's so important right now to be flexible with athletes and let them do things they would normally, do, or, take on specific challenges that you wouldn't normally, encourage, during a training cycle, because we need to keep our attention span locked in to doing something positive, even if it's like, like you could, like, in my opinion, it'd be the same thing as like, well, you're studying for this really, really hard calculus test, but it's not going to happen for a year and a half. We're already pretty much most of the way there. I know that we can't just keep driving it home. Instead of just not studying at all, let's maybe study chemistry for a little bit, just to kind of change gears. But what it's going to do is it's going to keep you in a behavior, and it's going to keep you in a habit. It's going to keep you in a pattern that's going to stay focused. You're going to continue to use your brain. You're going to continue to use the tools that you already have. You're going to be smarter overall. It's just not going to be specific to the exact test you're going to take. But what it is going to do is make you smarter overall, or fitness wise, is going to make you fitter overall, because movement is movement. And I think that's one thing that gets lost in a lot of especially triathletes' minds, is that once they become a triathlete, they can no longer associate themselves as anything but a three-sport person. But what's better, being a quote unquote triathlete who's not working out at all, or deciding that you love triathlon, but right now you don't have the brain power or the energy, the time to do those hours, but what you can do is run a lot? Well, that this new runner who used to be a triathlete, you know what they're going to be in the next year and a half? A much better runner and future triathlete than the other person who is obsessed about still being a triathlete and not giving things up, but still not getting anything done. And that is why, like, right now, like I said, as a coach, it is such an interesting time. I've never experienced anything like it in my career of coaching. Is just the ebbs and flows of energy, the ebbs and flows of mental and emotional kind of inner turmoil, or also introspection that athletes are
Mm.
doing with their lives, and like with what they really want out of life. And as a coach, like, if you're there are a lot of coaches out there who are super performance based, and that's all they care about are PRs and personal bests and winning. And I get that. That I think there's a place for that. I think the world needs people like that, because, obviously high performance sport demands that. But for me, and for, I know for you as well, like, the way that we coach is first and foremost, like, dude, I just want you to be happy. Like,
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
care what you do. I don't care if you say, hey coach, like, I don't want to, I want to do this instead. I want to just swim, or I want to just bike, or I want to just run, or I want to do this. Like, what do I do? Well, you do it. Like, it doesn't mean, A, we can't coach you, but like, you need to be happy, and you need to understand what makes you happy. But within that, and before you can even decide that, you have to kind of do that inventory of, okay, what really does make me happy right now? Because like I said, a lot of these athletes even picked races like a year ago that have been deferred to the next year. That's 2 years. Like, it's
Uh,
insane to think about what happens in 2 years, and but it's all about being happy.
yeah, it is all about being happy. It's all about kind of keeping that interest level too, because think about how difficult it, let's say 2 years ago or even last year, it is to keep people engaged over the off season in
Hmm.
general. We always talk about it's like, I'll get back January 1st and basically throw away November and December and then kind of get back into it. Now all of a sudden we're extending that. It's like the year-long off season in a way
Hmm.
for a lot of people. And man, what a challenge that can be, especially that because 2 years or a year and a half just seems like it's never going to come. But that's why it's so important just to sort of sink back into the present, like you said earlier, and figure out what it is. For me right now, that energy's loading U-Hauls, for example. I just,
Right.
it's like I can't train. I don't even have a race on the calendar for one. So I'm just trying to, stabilize energy on a daily basis, which is always kind of more of a challenge as you get older anyway, probably. But
Mm-hmm.
here I am thinking about, boy, do I want to do a race? I want to force this thing in there because of that whole idea is like, man, I really want to do it. And I think ultimately I love that experience so much, even as painful as it can be on the Ironman marathon or something like that, that short period of time and that fight that you have to put in, there's something
Mm.
magical about that, and again, going back to the woman who did her own Ironman, she just experienced that probably times 10, that part, and then just to be around that environment, man, and obviously that's the Ironman brand, and that's what they've created. I think that really keeps this thing going for a lot of people is that whole 4-day experience or whatever that culminates with this big idea that we can all come together and just be grateful and worry free, and then wake up the next day and have breakfast and eat as much as you want and
That's
talk
right.
about this. I mean, those are the moments, right? But how do you create those mini moments in your daily life? That's what I
Mm.
want to know. That's
Man,
that's the key, right?
man, you just like nailed one of those, like that part for me, as a coach too, is like you said about, you talked about the escape, that we get, like you literally do, like you get to like go in this like special universe planet to where you and 2,000 other athletes get to basically have your very own day with no in a with no interruptions and no distractions and no, not worrying about this for like, 9, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours. Like I joke about this with some people. I'm like, I've got a lot of athletes that are single parents that work insanely demanding jobs and have like 2 or 3 kids. And I'm like, first of all, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you like get this work done no matter what. But I'm like, dude, an Ironman for you is going to be like a day off compared to like the day-to-day stresses that you normally have. You're not going to have your kids, coming at you. You're not going to have life. You're not going to have work. Like it's your chance to like escape. And I do think that's also a piece that everyone is missing. And I also think it's why people are looking towards different challenges to do things, is that we all need an escape. Like I think it's important to understand and realize that I mean, I have athletes that say that frequently, like, I just needed the day off. I just needed to escape. I needed a day off. I needed to go for a hike. I needed to go for a long swim. I need to get in the kayak or hop on the boat or do whatever. I just need to feel not like, let's be honest, like life sucks the energy out of you. Like,
That's what
yes,
it does.
it does. I think that's just like, I think that's, might sound like a harsh way to put it, but that's what it is. You wake up, and from the moment you wake up, there are things you have to do. There are things that you read. There are things that you consume. There are videos you watch that suck portions of energy out of you. And then there are also obviously ways you freely give your energy through conversations, through reading a book, through training, through whatever. Like it's that ebb and flow. But during a race, it's like 100% up to us. We get to choose how we're going to spend our energy today. And then, which is also, I think, which is kind of weird, is that everyone around you, they just assume that you're going to be selfish with your energy that day. Like you have your own, like, Sherpa crew. You've got your own posse that's like, oh, anything you need today, don't even think about lifting that bike pump. I got that for you, bro. Let me just go ahead and get that for you. Walk to the swim start. You're holding your goggles, and your wife, holding her 9 kids, is also carrying like 16 bags and a camera and your bike pump and your spare helmet. And they're like, I got you, babe. Go for it. And you're like, wait a minute. Why is this working like this? But it's just like you come to expect that this is our day. And I think that's part of what the draw to endurance sports is that, like, we we are selfish beings to an extent, and I believe
Hmm.
we can also be very unselfish. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being selfish with our time. Like most people will tell you that if like the time they spend away working on themselves or taking time for themselves, like I know for me specifically, when I am working out, when I am training, when I am, consistent every single day, I am a much better father and I am a much better husband. When you take that time away, because what it does, if you're doing things that are positive, it's filling your cup. But if you were just doing things that suck the life out of you, then your cup is going to run dry. And at some point, you're just going to have dry cup after dry cup after dry cup with
I
nothing to
know.
show for it. Versus doing things that, like every day, even like the days that I might wake up and I might be grumpy or I might have had a rough morning with Hayden or I was super tired, there has never been a day where I've gotten off this podcast and not felt more energized than when I started. Now I
Hmm.
might be like emotionally and mentally drained depending on what direction we go, but I always get like this pick me up because it fills my cup. And so I think that that's a huge part of racing and training, that we're all just looking for different ways to fill our mental, emotional, and physical cups.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's it, man. I really, it's a weird thing to think about because, we started this company, I think with that goal in mind, sort of as like, how can we keep filling our cups and do what we want to do every day and create a situation where, life does give us energy instead of taking it away all the time, there's so many things that the patterns that we create in our lives can be so demoralizing at times. It's like, oh, you need energy, right? And then I got to get up and do this again. Why does this keep happening? Well, it's really important, I think, to step back and look at things from a big perspective and, decide really if it's working, because I mean, I think that it's such a subtle grind sometimes that you get, I think a lot of people, me included, in back in my corporate days, I kept waking up going, man, I just don't know if I have the energy to do this today. And certainly you'd, suck down a bunch of coffee and then go in there and just sort of plow through it. And then by the end, you're just exhausted. And then, oh, now you got to work out and, all these
Mm-hmm.
other things. Man, I just think that there's such an underestimated energy sap in a lot of our lives. And we have to kind of really figure that out. Um, because it is one of those things too where that, yeah, oh, I got to work out, I got to do this hard workout, I just don't have it, and then you get going and the blood gets pumping and you do it, but while it feels good maybe at the time, I think you're slowly tapping your reserves, and it's just a snowball effect that can really pick up and sort of wake up one day and be like, wow, where am I, so it is crucial, I think, to be able to figure out what's going on in your daily situation and make sure that it is giving you more energy in a positive way. And it's a tricky one, man.
I also, the way you phrased that was great, because I also find that with athletes that they use training, for triathlons or whatever it is, as a top off to their
Hmm.
energy reserve. And when they have like a life that they, or a work status or a personal status aren't that great, and then so they're training a lot, they're using training and triathlon to really top off their energy stores with lots of training. And then you see them get into like a really awesome relationship or get a promotion at work that now are actually filling them up in a positive way. They
Right.
almost become disinterested in training as much as they were before, because they see that they don't maybe need that energy pitcher as much as they did before. So they train less and like, I'm actually okay with this guy. I'm super happy right now. I just think it's a really interesting, balance, kind of like if you put them all on a
Yeah.
scale, is
Yeah.
that like, when life is like super good, you're like, I don't know that I need more. But when life is like really struggling, like I just needed this today. Like you needed that. It's just a very interesting relationship I think we all have with training for anything, no matter what sport it is. When and why and how we need it, I think is very representative of how our life is and what our relationship is with it. Is it complementing it, your already wonderful life or your great life, or is it something that you feel like you just desperately need? And what is it actually filling? What is it actually topping off? Are you overflowing if you have it? Like, is it just making your life that much better? Or is it stretching you thin, and is it actually draining you? Or, are you depending on it too much to top you off completely? Because that's the other end of the spectrum. People who are really struggling, instead of like, I think we even referenced this maybe on like the last podcast or so, is like you find athletes that are really struggling, they assume and want training to fill their cup completely, that they will bike and run and swim to any length to make themselves feel better or to fill that time or fill that void, but it can't. And so I just think it really is, it's like it's a very interesting concept, I think, to try and even like for myself, like wrap my brain around like the ebbs and flows of your like relationship with training and how it
Yeah.
evolves and what it. But the great thing about it is it can be anything, but that also means it can be great and also means it can be bad.
I thought of an analogy the other day because I was moving, and it involves a bungee cord.
Let's hear it, baby.
Okay, so imagine you have a bungee cord in your both hands, and you're just holding it out, and it's not stretched yet. So I'm going to use this as my corporate life. So corporate in my job is on my left hand, and triathlon is on my right hand, the far ends of the scale, like the ultimate like workout machine on the right, and the workaholic on the left. And as you stretch it, they get further and further apart, and you have to go further to make that happen. But in and as you stretch it, the tension just gets so strong, and you're always bouncing back and forth and everything like that. But all you got to do is just kind of let it come back to the bed, because there's a middle ground right in there somewhere that we
Mm-hmm.
have to find somewhere in the middle.
Mm.
And of course, I was thinking about that in politics too, is like, or whatever was going on, arguments these days. It's like, man, everybody's just stretching that thing so far apart. And when all we have to do is really just kind of say, hey, let's come to the middle here and figure this thing out and just balance out our lives, man, because it's all in there. It's just that, I would probably say, I mean, I never was a big fan of working in news, but I'm sure if I didn't get so intense with like the hatred of, and then want to over, you know, pile on more triathlon to just bury the news thing. You know what I mean? It's like
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
just completely was on the edges of everything. So when I was like, I'm not in news anymore, I'm all a triathlete, So I just
Mm-hmm. Yep.
decided
I'm
to go
all
way
in.
out to the edge. And it just created all this tension, man, when there could have been just this happy medium. And it could be arguments or, with spouses and everything. I think that sort of thought process can really make things easier for everybody. If we can just say like, hey, I hear where you're coming from, but like, I'm here. Can we just meet in the middle a little bit?
I love that analogy.
The old bungee cord.
If not for just the fact of what it like, as I visualize it, what it represents is either no tension or tension.
Mm,
If you've got it just sitting in your hand, with the hooks on the end and one in each hand, it's got no tension. And the thing is that we see it and we look at it as opportunity to just create tension. That it's almost basically useless, if we're not using it. In that I think human nature and how we've evolved as people and as we train is that like if I'm like what do I even need this for if I'm not going to stretch it all the way, like it's not doing anything. Its specific use is to be used to stretch and connect things and do whatever you want to with it. So we feel like almost obligated to do that. And I think that's how we see so much of our life is that we have to be busy. We have to train to this extent. We have to have this many friendships and this many relationships, and we have to do this with our business and professional life. We have to do this with the money that we have. We have to do this with our vacations. We have to do this with everything. And I think like you said, like it just stretches you thin, and the thinner you are, the more likely you are to break. In some way, if mentally, emotionally, physically, people do that with training. They stretch themselves so thin that I think we're just accustomed to living our lives with a specific amount of stress attached to it. And so what we do is we oftentimes create more stress to either counteract that stress or to balance it out when like I was saying about training and in terms of it's filling your cup, is it fill your cup or taken away? If you have a really crappy day at work, a lot of athletes will say I totally needed this to make myself feel better, fill my cup. And I think that's a positive way to use it. But on the other end of the spectrum, I also think that we tend to use other things and be like, oh, why not, like it doesn't always have to be a give and a take. I think it could also be like a give and absorb and understand that, okay, I'm better off actually not trying to balancing it out because it also takes more energy to do that.
mm. Yeah, it does.
I like
I
the
was,
blended word.
I, you mentioned Mark McGuire earlier. Have you happened to watch that? I don't know if you probably did. The Mark
The
McGuire
answer is
Sosa.
no.
The
No.
answer is no.
Yeah, the answer is no.
Well, this is a good example for me. Like I got swept up into the McGuire Sosa,
Oh, I did
Roger
too.
Maris
Yeah,
chase.
I did too back then.
And so I watched this the other day, and I'm just obviously a baseball nostalgia guy, and I just really enjoy them talking about why that record mattered and why it's so important, blah blah blah. And I was so caught up in the home run chase that summer, and then remember being really mad and like, like, oh man, they cheated, blah blah blah. Well, as I watched this, he was taking some, was it Andro or something like that, like over the counter, because they saw it in his
Yeah.
locker. He
Hmm.
was just it was in his locker. He's buying it probably from just some GNC type place, or or probably supplier, but um, it was a legal substance. I mean, like, I just had my in my McGuire hit 49 home runs as a rookie, as a spindly rookie, and here's a guy that, beefed it up, and, like his argument was like, hey, I was strong enough, but I was just trying to prevent injury, and it's a long season and things like that. And anyway, the point being is I remember how much energy I spent on being mad about that. And now as I look back on it, 20 some years later, whatever it was 30 years later, I don't know. And it was, I don't really care. So this is what I'm getting at right now, is that we get so wrapped up in these arguments. And, like I always tell people, it's like, look, man, I've been around a while. I'd said, oh, that veteran, wily guy or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, I've seen a lot of these things play out before, So the intensity that kind of cranks up with social media, because now you've got everybody and their brother wanting to say stuff about whatever. But the energy I spent on that arguing about McGuire and pissed off and whatever and like that, it's just like it doesn't even matter anymore. So if we can get ourselves out of the, it's kind of weird because I want to be in the moment, but let's get out of the moment too and really look at things like, oh man, is this worth my time? Is this worth my
Hmm.
energy? Because what is really important, man, is
Well,
not stuff like that because it
yeah.
just goes away. I mean, think about how intense certain things seemed in your life at one point, and now it's like, what? Why was I even so into that?
Well, it's knowing when to exit the moment, like to
Hmm.
when it's no longer benefiting you. Like I always, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I used to 100% be this guy that I'd watch a football game or a basketball game, and if my team lost, it would like I would be upset and grumpy and pissed like the rest of the day. Like and now I'm not like that.
Yeah, that's a great example.
In a large part because Tennessee is so god awful at football. And
Thank you for
I've
that.
been a Miami Dolphins fan my whole life, so I'm like, it's kind of like, I've come because this comes part of the territory. But if you flip those, like if you're a person who's like has a sports team that you love, or you've had really really bad days, like Kentucky basketball and they play at Tennessee, we just tend to own them. Is that ruins the rest of their day. But if you flip that, if you want to feel like how absolutely ridiculous that is to take your favorite football team and take their offense and defense of 22 starters, put them in the bleachers and ask them to watch one of your races. Do you think how that race would end or how it went would impact them at all? Zero. They wouldn't care. They would just go about their daily business. Yet we watch complete strangers on TV and it ruins the rest of our day when we could be doing something else. So I think that listen, there's great thing. I love team sports just as much as the next guy, but I think it's interesting to like look at your relationships with these things and how they use your time and when it's good to be present, when it's time to just exit.
Yeah. Well, you always joke with me, man, about how I'm out, I'm out, I'm done on the
You
Badgers.
already every February when Wisconsin starts off like 3-7, you're like, you know what, man, that's it. I'm out. I
I'm
can't do
out,
it
I'm
anymore.
out.
I'm out. I'm canceling my cable. I'm giving my TVs away. You're gonna have to send me like the USA Today Sports page, and that's gonna be it. And then they do their
US.
and then Wisconsin does their usual where they go off and win like 45 in the next 46 games, and they're back in it, and you're like, yeah. I don't know, man. This might be the year. And then
But then
you
at the crux of it, I'm just saying the crux of why I do that is because I've struggled with that too, right? That's really why I think I want out, is that I think I want out. This has got the chains on me, but I this whole pandemic thing and all the sports going away and everything, it's really had an interesting impact on all that because you can't force yourself out of stuff sometimes. Like if it's like it's better to kind of like let it go and And I think this has almost forced me to sort of let it go because I haven't, I used to be that guy that would be like checking in every day on what's going on in Badger sports or whatever. And now I'm just not, I think it's sort of loosened my grip. So there's
Mm,
been an interesting, and just in
EPT.
sports in general. I mean, like, me, I'm a big baseball fan. They haven't even played
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just sitting there going, well, whatever, you know. I just I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be interesting. I think
And it's because you don't know. That's the thing. Is that, a lot of people who are obsessed with professional sports also belong to these like, sub sub parts of like the team, and like their, like Tennessee has like volquest.com, which is all things college football and all things Tennessee recruiting, how spring practices are going. And if you know when the season's starting, like this time of year is when it just like ramps up. Like you're checking in, you're like, how are these recruits doing? How are things looking? Who are the starters going to be? Because you know when the first game is going to be, because you
hmm
know it's close. But
yeah.
now no one cares because you have no idea when the first game is going to be. And I think that's also a good analogy for how people are associating their relationship and commitment to training, is that like they when they know things are going to happen, they're super invested in it, and it takes up a lot of their brain power for the good or the bad. But now that they're just kind of unsure when it's going to be, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing either, is they're becoming slightly disinterested.
Yeah. And especially if, people aren't going to the games or they make that whole thing where nobody's going to be watching. Will it feel it's like what you said about, well, if they came to watch your Ironman, would they really care? But if nobody seems to be interested in the game, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
maybe it's people they're going to be looking around and go, wait a minute. It was all about the energy of the crowd, right?
Hmm.
I think
Yep.
that's really the most underrated piece of all of this is they're saying, "We'll just play and people will watch." And
Right.
I'm gonna be like, I don't know, man. I'm not gonna be. I you turn on a TV and watch a scrimmage game, you kind of like not really in, right? That's what it's gonna feel like to me if there's not a big crowd or whatever. But
Yeah, it's like I get zero, like absolutely, I have zero desire to watch any of these like virtual VR races where these pro triathletes sit in their den and bike hard. Like I have zero interest in watching anything virtual.
I know.
Like I don't see any point. Now, if you wanted to show me live an actual race, like where they're in the flesh doing it, then I'm all in. Like
hmm
with and like doing it on like a corporate, I have no interest in that. Like, but I think I know I agree with you. I think that's going to be a really interesting um everything impacts another. And going back to like one of the 19 topics I tried to get across in the first 7 minutes about energy was like that's one of the best like visible and physical things you can feel about how energy flows between groups of people and individuals, is going to a race and feeling that energy. Like you some of like one of the biggest like chills and like emotional and like mental like energy things I got ever in my like, triathlon was standing in 4th Street Live at Ironman Louisville when it's super dark at like 11 o'clock, when people are trying to make the finish line and people are just pounding and beating on like the sides of the
The boards.
finishing chute, the boards, and it's just like insanely loud and people are cheering. Like you can feel it. Like it is palpable. You can absolutely feel it. And it gave me chills. Like these obviously like really good, like almost emotional chills. You can feel it. And without those kind of opportunities, without those things there, it's not going to be the same. You cannot replicate that. It's just not the same. It's like you have, professional teams that professional, especially in the NFL, like they'll bring in like, super, if they're going to go play in Seattle or somewhere else where it's super, super loud, they will bring in like these speakers and pump music to like, make you feel like like it's going to be on game day. And then and like that, like that's perfect practice. And then you get to game day and it's 110,000 people and you can like watch the quarterback and you're like, dude, they have no idea what's going on. They can't hear a thing. It's not just the volume, it's the energy that affects everything. And I do think that's something that that we're all going to recognize that we either took for granted and that we really, really miss.
Yeah, for sure we are. All right, man. Is that where we're at? I think
That's all
that's a
I
good
got.
place
Yeah, I
to
mean,
end.
like, yeah, but there was another topic I was thinking about going through today, and I'll let you know. That's it, man. That was
Let's go
that's
through
something
another
else.
one.
No, I'm good.
Hour and a
I'm
half
thinking to
podcast. Before I
Thank you.
forget, I want to
Yep.
throw out this thought. If you're going to Muncie, I was contacted by the head of the volunteers up there, and they're looking for people to volunteer in the day before the race in the race check-in. I guess it's called race registration. I'll put a link in this show notes for that if you want to sign up for that. And this can be if you're racing or not racing, or if you have family around. They just need they've had some challenges getting the groups all back together, but they just need
Hmm.
specific help the day before at the check-in, which is called athlete registration, I guess, on the website. But I'll put a link in that because everybody's gonna, we want that one to go good.
Yep.
It's the sort of the measuring stick in a lot of ways, I think, for the rest of the season. So if you're going to be up there, if you have some time the day before, that would be awesome.
Yeah. It's the pilot episode.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, we wanted to go through. So do that. As always, appreciate you tuning in. I will apologize for the podcast pinata that I had Mike going on for the first 15 minutes. But sometimes you sometimes you have so many good topics that you just got to go, got to see what happens. So I hope you enjoyed it. As always, thanks for listening. You can always dive back into the rest of our catalog. Mike does an outstanding job of outlining those and giving descriptions. You can pick and choose or listen in order. If you haven't, please check out our website, C26Triathlon.com. It is your one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community, and also our online hub. Check that out. If you have any questions specifically for Mike, you can get hold of him, crushingiron@gmail.com. Or if you have any need for asking me anything, you can ask me at C26Coach@gmail.com.
All right, bud. Thanks for
All right.
picking up the mood.
Always, man.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
See you, dude.